In the deep shadowed wilds, a terrible beast roams, the dreaded Hodag. 3 bone-chilling tales unfold where terror lurks in every step, and no fate is ever truly safe. Dare to watch? In a small town near a dark forest known as Old Pine Ridge, people spoke in low voices of a fearsome creature called the Hodag. They said it had the body of a giant beast and the eyes of burning coals, and it roamed the woods at night. One evening, a man named Calvin, curious and brave, decided to search for the truth. Calvin had grown up hearing stories about the Hodag and believed that some legends might hide a secret. With a heavy heart and a mind filled with questions, he left his home and walked toward the old forest. Calvin made his way along a dusty path that wound through the towering pines. The trees loomed over him like ancient guardians, their branches stretching high and blocking the sky. As he ventured deeper, the shadows grew darker. Calvin felt a chill in his bones, even though the night was still warm. He remembered the old tale that said the Hodag did not always come at the stroke of midnight, but could be found when the forest itself whispered warnings. Suddenly, Calvin came upon a clearing where the ground was littered with broken twigs and deep, large footprints. The marks were huge and led off into a thick stand of trees. Calvin's heart began to race as he followed the trail. Every step he took felt heavy, as if the very earth was trying to hold him back. He could not shake the thought that these footprints belonged to the Hodag, a beast feared by everyone in town. Calvin pressed on until he reached a small grove. In the center of the grove, a large, dark shape rested beneath the boughs of an old pine. The creature was partly hidden in the shadows. Calvin stood still, feeling the weight of ancient stories come to life. There was no friendly light in the creature's eyes. Instead, there burned a fierce and untamed anger. The beast's form was rough and spiky, with a wide, jagged mouth that looked ready to bite. The creature stirred, and Calvin could see the contours of a massive head with fierce eyes that glowed like embers. The Hodag slowly lifted its head and fixed its gaze upon Calvin. The silence was broken by the pounding of Calvin's own heart, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. In that moment, there was no way to know if Calvin would survive the encounter. Calvin tried to retreat, but the creature began to move. Its steps were heavy and deliberate, echoing like thunder on the hard ground. Calvin's legs trembled as he tried to run, but the dense underbrush made every step a struggle. The beast advanced steadily, its growls soft at first, but rising in intensity as it came closer. Calvin's fear turned to despair as he realized he was trapped with no clear escape. The Hodag circled him, its eyes never leaving his face. There was a wild hunger in its gaze that chilled Calvin to the core. Every instinct told him to run, but his body would not obey. The creature's breath was heavy and hot, and Calvin could feel the raw force of nature in every step it took. He remembered the whispered warnings of old, that the Hodag took those who dared to challenge the wild, leaving them to vanish into the darkness of the forest forever. As the creature drew nearer, Calvin tried one last desperate plea for mercy. He did not speak aloud, for his voice was caught in his throat, but his eyes pleaded for help that would not come. The Hodag lowered its massive head and roared. The sound shook the ground beneath them, and for a moment, the night itself seemed to weep with sorrow. In that final moment, as Calvin's eyes closed in resignation, the Hodag's roar drowned out all hope, and the man was lost to the endless night of Old Pine Ridge. The clearing grew quiet again, the dark presence of the creature lingering as a grim reminder that some legends are not meant to be uncovered. The forest swallowed the truth of that night, and the fate of Calvin became yet another whispered warning among the people of the town. Far away from the busy town, on the outskirts of a lonely valley, lay an old, abandoned farm that no one dared approach. The fields were overgrown, and the farmhouse had long since decayed into a crumbling memory. Among the sparse locals, the farm was known as a cursed land, a place where the Hodag was said to roam. A young woman named Marisol, filled with a mix of dread and determination, decided to visit the farm to search for answers about the beast. Marisol arrived at the farm just as the sun was sinking, casting long, eerie shadows across the deserted fields. The farmhouse door creaked as she stepped inside, her footsteps echoing in the empty halls. The air was thick with dust and memories of a time long past. Marisol had heard the old stories from her grandmother about the Hodag, a monster with wild eyes and a savage nature that haunted the cursed lands. Though her heart pounded with fear, she pressed on, determined to uncover the truth. Outside, the wind began to pick up, stirring the dead leaves and whispering secrets through the broken windows. Marisol found a worn journal on a dusty table, filled with notes and warnings about the farm. The entries spoke of eerie sightings and strange sounds in the night. One page described footprints as large as a man's and a beast with a crooked smile. The journal filled her with a growing sense of foreboding. As night fell, Marisol decided to explore the farm's overgrown fields. The moon was hidden behind heavy clouds, leaving the land in near darkness. With only a small lantern to guide her, she walked through the tall grass until she found a path that led to a barn. The barn, dilapidated and covered in vines, seemed to watch her every step. She hesitated before entering, but her curiosity overrode her fear. Inside the barn, the air was damp and cold. The wooden beams creaked under the weight of time, and every corner held the threat of the unknown. Suddenly, Marisol saw deep, heavy footprints pressed into the soft earth beneath the barn's door. Her heart sank as she recalled the legends. With each step, the footprints grew larger, as if a giant beast had walked by. Marisol's mind raced with thoughts of the Hodag lurking in the darkness. Marisol crept outside, following the trail of footprints that led into a small grove at the edge of the farm. There, under a twisted old tree, stood a creature unlike any she had seen before. The Hodag was enormous, its body rough and spiked, with eyes that burned with a fierce, wild light. Its mouth was a jagged line, and its presence filled the air with an undeniable menace. Marisol froze as the beast slowly turned its head toward her. For a moment, time seemed to slow down. Marisol's eyes met the cold, unyielding stare of the Hodag. In that heartbeat, she realized that the legends were not just tales to frighten children. The beast moved with deliberate malice, as if marking her as its next victim. Marisol's steps faltered, and a wave of panic surged through her. She tried to run, but the overgrown field made every movement a struggle. The creature advanced steadily, its footsteps heavy and echoing. Marisol's heart pounded so loudly she was sure the beast could hear it. She reached a narrow gap between two decrepit fences, hoping to slip away. Yet the Hodag followed, its eyes never leaving her. There was no escape from the cursed farm. In the final moments, as the beast closed in, Marisol's pleas for mercy were lost in the relentless approach of the monster. The fields grew silent once more, and the haunted farm kept its dreadful secret. Marisol's fate remained a mystery, a stark reminder to all who heard the tale that some places hold curses too dark to break. The memory of the Hodag on that forgotten farm lingered like a dark shadow over the valley. High in the rugged hills, there was an old, rarely used trail known as the Cursed Trail. Locals whispered that anyone who wandered along its path would eventually face the wrath of the Hodag. A young man named Darren, seeking a taste of adventure, decided to explore the trail despite the many warnings. Darren was brave, perhaps too brave, and his heart pounded with both excitement and fear as he set out on his journey. The Cursed Trail wound through dense woodlands and rocky clearings. The air was cool and still, and the trees formed a tight canopy overhead. Darren's footsteps were soft as he followed the narrow path, his mind filled with thoughts of the legends he had heard since childhood. The Hodag was said to be a creature of immense power and cruelty, and Darren could not help but feel that the forest was alive with unseen eyes watching his every move. After several hours of walking, Darren reached a part of the trail where the rocks were scattered like broken pieces of a long-forgotten puzzle. Here, the air turned heavy, and the silence grew thick. Darren noticed large, deep prints in the muddy ground, each step marked by an unearthly size. His heart began to pound as he realized that these footprints could only belong to the Hodag. With a mix of determination and dread, he followed the trail of prints deeper into the hills. Soon, Darren found himself at the edge of a steep clearing, where the ground dropped sharply into a dark, rocky gorge. At the center of the clearing, emerging from behind a cluster of boulders, stood a monstrous figure. The Hodag was even more fearsome than the stories had described. Its body was covered in rough, bumpy skin and thick, wild hair, and its eyes glowed with an eerie, burning light. Its jagged mouth formed a line of cruelty, and its presence made the ground tremble. Darren froze as he stood at the edge of the clearing, his breath shallow and his hands trembling. The creature turned slowly, and Darren felt as if time itself had come to a standstill. There was no warning and no chance to escape. The beast's gaze locked onto him with a fury that sent shivers down his spine. Darren tried to take a step back, but his feet felt rooted to the spot. The Hodag began to move with a slow, deliberate menace, each step echoing like a drumbeat in the stillness of the clearing. Darren's eyes widened with terror as he realized that the legends were no mere tales, they were his reality. The creature advanced steadily, its eyes never leaving his face. Darren's mind raced with thoughts of regret and fear as he searched desperately for a way to hide or run, but the rocky terrain offered no safe haven. In that grim moment, Darren understood that his fate was sealed. The Hodag loomed over him like a dark omen, and there was no heroic escape or hidden refuge. As the beast reached out with a massive clawed hand, Darren's heart sank, and the hope of returning home faded into the darkness of the trail. His final cry was swallowed by the wild, and the cursed path claimed another soul. The clearing grew silent once more, the haunting presence of the Hodag lingering among the rocks and trees. Darren's journey ended there, leaving behind a chilling tale of a young man whose desire for adventure led him into the arms of an unspeakable horror. The cursed trail continued to lie in wait, a grim reminder that some paths lead only to despair and ruin. As the dark night gives way to an uncertain dawn, these three grim tales of the Hodag remind us that not every journey finds a safe end. From the haunted woods of Old Pine Ridge to the cursed trails of rugged hills, terror walks among us in the form of ancient legends. Thank you for joining us on this journey into a realm where fear has no mercy, and every step may be your last. Remember, some legends are best left undisturbed, for their shadows stretch far beyond the light.